You don't procrastinate on things you don't care about. You procrastinate on the things that matter most. And that's not laziness. That's fear. Think about it. You can binge 6 episodes of something you don't even like. You can scroll for an hour without blinking. You can clean your entire apartment, answer emails you've been ignoring for weeks, do literally anything, except the one thing you actually want to do. The thing you tell people you're passionate about. The thing you think about when you're doing all that other stuff. The painting, the novel, the music, the business idea you've had for 3 years. And the worst part? You can't explain why. Because it's not like you don't want to do it. You want to do it desperately. So why does sitting down to actually start feel like walking towards something dangerous? Because to your brain, it is. Here's what nobody tells you about procrastination on the things you love. It has nothing to do with discipline. It has nothing to do with motivation. It's not a scheduling problem or a focus problem. It's a survival mechanism. And once you understand what it's actually protecting you from, everything changes. Let's start with the thing your brain is most afraid of. When you procrastinate on a work task, something that's just a job, something that doesn't define you, and you do it badly, or late, or not at all, it stings. But you recover. Because that task was never really about who you are. It was just a thing you had to do. But your passion? That's different. Your passion is tied to your identity. It's the thing you point to when you want to believe you're more than ordinary. It's the place where your self-image lives. And that means the stakes are completely different. If you try, really try, and it's not good, the threat isn't just embarrassment. The threat is to your entire sense of self. The version of you that is a writer, a musician, a creator, an entrepreneur. That identity gets put on trial. And your brain, whose entire job is to protect you, does the most logical thing it can. It stops you from starting. Because here's the brutal psychology of it. If you never finish, you can never truly fail. An unfinished project is a dream preserved. A finished one is a verdict. And so procrastination becomes your shield. Not against the work, against the judgment, against the possibility that the thing you've built your whole self-concept around might not be as real as you need it to be. This is what psychologists call identity protective cognition. When something feels threatening to who we believe we are, the brain treats it the same way it treats physical danger. The amygdala fires. Anxiety rises. And suddenly, anything else, anything at all, feels more urgent, more manageable, more safe than sitting down and doing the work. That scroll you went on? Your brain chose it for you. Because scrolling can't tell you that you're not who you think you are. Now, here's where it gets counterintuitive. The more talented you are, the worse this gets. People assume that if you're genuinely good at something, starting would feel easier. But the opposite is often true. Because the more potential you have, the higher your internal standard climbs. And the higher your standard, the more terrifying the gap between what you imagine you could create and what you actually produce when you sit down. Creative people don't suffer from a lack of vision. They suffer from too much of it. The idea in your head is always perfect. It's vivid and brilliant and exactly what it needs to be. But the moment you put it into the world, it becomes real. And real things are never perfect. So instead of closing that gap through practice, through iteration, through showing up imperfectly and getting better, the mind finds a way to avoid it entirely. You research instead of creating. You plan instead of producing. You use every tool, every resource, every preparatory ritual as a reason why today isn't the right day to actually begin. And it looks productive. It feels almost like progress. But it's avoidance wearing the costume of preparation. And here's something even more uncomfortable to sit with. Your perfectionism isn't actually about quality. It's about protection. Setting an impossibly high bar for yourself isn't ambition. It's a safety net. Because if your standards are high enough, unreachably high, then you always have an excuse ready. It's not done yet. It's not ready. I'm still working on it. And as long as you're still working on it, you never have to find out what the world actually thinks. Unfinished is safe. Unfinished is potential without risk. And your brain has learned to keep you there, comfortable and stuck, telling you it's called standards when really it's called fear. But here's what I want you to hold on to. None of this means something is wrong with you. This pattern doesn't make you weak or broken or secretly untalented. It makes you human. And more specifically, it makes you someone who cares deeply. You can't be terrified of failing at something you're indifferent to. The fear is proof that it matters. The problem isn't your passion. The problem is that somewhere along the way, your worth got fused to your output. Somewhere you learned, maybe from a parent, a teacher, a comparison you made to someone else, that your value as a person depends on the quality of what you produce. And when that belief takes root, creating stops being an act of expression and becomes an act of self-evaluation. Every blank page is a test. Every brushstroke is evidence for or against who you are. And no wonder you'd rather not take the exam. So how do you actually start to change this? There are 2 shifts. Just 2, but they're real ones. The first is to separate your identity from your output. You are not your work. You are the person who makes the work. And those are not the same thing. A painter who makes a bad painting is still a painter. A writer who writes a bad chapter is still a writer. The work is something you do. It is not something you are. This sounds simple, and it is. But most people have never actually practiced it. So practice it consciously. Before you sit down to create anything, say it out loud if you have to. Whatever I make today does not determine my worth. I am allowed to make something bad. I am allowed to be in the middle of getting better. The second shift is to make the unit of success as small as possible. Stop trying to create the finished thing. Stop trying to produce the great thing. Your only job, the only metric that matters, is to sit down for 5 minutes and make something bad on purpose. Seriously, the goal is a bad first draft, a rough sketch, a terrible first take. Something so low stakes that your brain doesn't sound the alarm. Because here's what actually happens when you do that. You start. And starting, for most people, is the entire battle. The resistance is almost always at the threshold. Once you're inside the work, the anxiety drops, the inner critic quiets, and something that feels almost like joy starts to come back. That's not an accident. That's the flow state returning. And it only comes when you stop performing and start playing. Your passion didn't become a source of anxiety because you stopped caring. It became a source of anxiety because you started caring too much about the outcome and not enough about the act. The process got buried under the pressure of the result. Reclaiming it means going back to something earlier. Back to the version of you that did this because it felt good, not because it proved something. Back to when the work was an escape, not an evaluation. That version of you still exists. They're just waiting for permission to be imperfect. So here's the question worth sitting with tonight. What would you create right now if you knew no one would ever see it? If there were no audience, no judgment, no verdict. Just you and the thing you love? Whatever just came to mind. That's where you start. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not after you've done more research or found the perfect conditions. Right now, with whatever you have, in whatever form it takes. 5 minutes. Something intentionally bad. A beginning with no pressure attached to it. Because the version of you who creates freely, who ships imperfect work, who shows up even when the inner critic is loud, that person doesn't just make better art. That person lives a better life. And you don't get there by overcoming fear all at once. You get there by proving one small session at a time that the fear was never as powerful as you believed. If this hit somewhere real for you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming. And it's all built for people who think deeply and want to understand themselves better. See you in the next one.